There's a brutal truth about a man's love that most women don't understand, because they've never been told. It's not that they don't want to know. It's simply that this truth has been hidden, overlooked, or even brushed aside for far too long. In fact, this secret has been buried so deep that many men themselves may not even realize they carry it with them every day. But what if I told you that understanding this truth could unlock a whole new dimension of connection, intimacy, and communication between you and the man in your life? Today, I'm going to reveal something that men have lived with for years but rarely speak about openly. It's something that shapes their actions, their words, and the way they experience love, whether they're showing it or not. This isn't about the typical cliches you hear in romantic comedies or the fairy tale version of love. This is raw, real, and vulnerable. It's the side of love that is often ignored, misunderstood, and brushed under the rug. If you're ready to listen without judgment, to truly understand the unspoken struggles and desires that many men carry with them, then you're about to hear a truth that very few women have ever had the chance to learn. And trust me, after hearing this, you'll never look at a man's love in the same way again. So, let's dive in. This is a side of love that no one dares to talk about, until now. Number 1. The misunderstood nature of a man's love. For far too long, society has painted a misleading picture of a man in love: cold, distant, stoic, perhaps driven only by surface-level desires. We've all seen the cliches: the strong, silent type who never really opens up, the man who keeps his emotions under tight control, or worse, the one whose love is only ever about the physical. But here's the harsh truth that very few people want to acknowledge. This is not the reality. The truth is, a man's love is often one of the most pure, raw, and powerful expressions of strength and vulnerability you can witness. It's an intense, multifaceted force that doesn't always manifest in the ways you might expect. This love isn't flashy. It doesn't always show up with grand romantic gestures or poetic words. Instead, it can be quietly profound, often hidden beneath layers of restraint and protection. Why? Because men are taught from an early age to hide their vulnerabilities. They're expected to be strong, to be providers, to shield their emotions and not let their guard down. This conditioning creates a complex dynamic where their love, no matter how deeply felt, might not always look the way women anticipate. A man's love often comes in the form of action, not words. It's seen in the little things, like the way he supports his partner silently, the sacrifices he makes without ever asking for anything in return, or the way he prioritizes her happiness and well-being, even when he's struggling inside. His love doesn't scream. It whispers through consistency, dedication, and the quiet moments of care he offers in his own unique way. But here's where the confusion arises. Women may not always recognize this love for what it truly is. The absence of dramatic displays of affection or the lack of emotional openness can make it seem as though his feelings aren't there at all. But that's a mistake. What women need to understand is that a man's love is not always about the outward expression. It's about the depth of his commitment, the quiet sacrifices he makes, and the security he offers. A man who loves deeply may not always be able to express it in a traditional, expected way, but that doesn't make it any less real or significant. So, the real question is, how can we learn to recognize a man's love for what it truly is, beyond the surface-level assumptions? This is where the truth begins to unravel, when you stop looking for love in the ways you expect, and start recognizing it in the ways it is quietly, powerfully offered. Number 2. The silent power of a man's love. When a man loves, he loves with every fiber of his being. His love isn't partial. It's all-encompassing. There's no half-heartedness. Yet, unlike the flashy declarations of love we often see in movies or hear about in romantic novels, a man's love tends to be quiet, almost invisible to the naked eye. This love is not measured by grand gestures or flowery words. Instead, it's woven into the fabric of his everyday actions, decisions, and choices. His love is most apparent when he steps in to protect, when he works tirelessly to provide, or when he takes on burdens, all without expecting applause or recognition. For him, this is love. It's a deep, steadfast commitment that is expressed through responsibility, dedication, and sacrifice. Imagine a man waking up early every morning to ensure his family is cared for, or working late into the night to make sure that the future is secure. He may never speak about the weight of these decisions, but the silent sacrifice he makes speaks volumes. It's in the small, often unnoticed things. The way he listens intently when you speak, even if he doesn't always know what to say in return, or the way he quietly steps in to handle things when you need support, even when he's exhausted or overwhelmed himself. This is a man who loves with his whole being. His actions, his time, his energy, and his mind are all invested in the ones he cares for. And yet, because this love is not loud or overt, it often goes unnoticed or misunderstood. Women, in particular, can sometimes feel frustrated by this quiet love. The absence of overt emotional expression or verbal affirmation may make it feel as though the love isn't there, but nothing could be further from the truth. His love is there. It's just quieter. It's the calm in the storm, the steady presence that doesn't need to shout to be heard. Men don't always have the words to express the depth of their love, but they don't need to. Their love is demonstrated by what they do and how they show up, day in and day out. Whether it's making sure everything at home is in order, or protecting his loved ones in ways that may never make the headlines, his love speaks louder than words could ever express. The truth is, this silent love is often the most powerful form of love. It's unshakable, reliable, and real in ways that words could never match. The question is, do we see it for what it truly is? Are we willing to recognize the quiet devotion that comes from a man who loves with his whole heart, even when he doesn't say it aloud? Number 3. What women don't see. Here's the part that many women fail to see or understand. A man's love is not a constant declaration. It's not something that can be captured in grand gestures or immortalized in romantic speeches. Instead, a man's love is a daily battle. Every single day, he fights to be the pillar that you can lean on when you need support. He works tirelessly to create a sense of security, to provide stability, and to make sure you feel protected in a world that is often unpredictable. But here's the truth. While he may appear strong and steadfast, behind that unwavering exterior lies a man who's constantly grappling with his own doubts, fears, and vulnerabilities. He hides these so that you don't have to carry them too. His burden remains his own, because he believes that it's his responsibility to carry the weight of the world, so you don't have to. What many women don't realize is that this is a battle he fights silently, without fanfare, without asking for credit. The love he gives is embedded in the quiet moments. The way he wakes up early to ensure everything is in place, the way he steps in to fix a problem you didn't even know existed, or the way he just listens without trying to solve anything, offering a safe space for you to express yourself. Even when he says nothing, just being there beside you, sitting quietly, offering his presence, is often an act of love. The love he shows doesn't always look like what you might expect from the movies. The passion, the excitement, the grand declarations. It's not that these things don't matter to him, but they're not always the way he expresses his deepest feelings. His love is silent, steady, and unshakable. And the unfortunate reality is, because it doesn't look like the love we see in films or read about in stories, it's all too easy to miss. Think about it. When he's there beside you, simply sharing a quiet moment, offering his company without any need for words, he's showing you he loves you in a way that goes beyond what words can capture. It's in his actions, not his declarations. It's in his consistent presence, his willingness to put you first, and his desire to make sure you feel safe and cared for. But so often, this love goes unnoticed because it doesn't fit into the mold of what we've been conditioned to expect. It's not flashy. It's not dramatic. It's not a grand spectacle of emotions that makes the world stop and stare. Instead, it's a love that builds over time, a love that is demonstrated through the small things, a smile when you need it, a hug when you're feeling down, a hand to hold when you're facing a challenge. What's often missed is that these quiet acts are some of the most profound expressions of love. And deep down, all a man really hopes for in return is to be seen, to be acknowledged for the love he's giving in his own way, to be understood, not just for the way he loves, but for how deeply he loves, even when he doesn't say a word. This love isn't less than the kind we see in movies. It's just different, and it deserves to be seen. Number 4. The weight of expectations. This is where the gap between understanding and reality truly begins to widen. Men carry an invisible weight, a burden that few talk about, but that shapes every decision they make, every action they take, and every word they speak. It's the weight of societal expectations, the relentless pressure to always be strong, reliable, and unshakable. Society tells men that they must be the providers, the protectors, the ones who never falter, who never show weakness. But here's the truth. This expectation is suffocating. From a young age, men are conditioned to hold up the world, to shoulder the responsibilities of their families, relationships, and communities. They're taught that vulnerability is a sign of weakness and that any expression of emotion beyond stoicism is a flaw. They are told to hide their fears, bury their doubts, and suppress their feelings. But where, in all of this, are they allowed to be human? Where are they given the space to be vulnerable, to show their love without fear of being judged? The reality is, they're not. Men are rarely given permission to express love freely, especially not in ways that make them feel safe or understood. They are expected to show affection, to be attentive, but only within the confines of what's deemed acceptable by society. And when a man steps outside of these boundaries, showing love in ways that don't fit the traditional mold, he risks being misunderstood or worse, rejected. So, when a man pulls away or seems distant, it's not because he doesn't love you. It's often because he feels the weight of misunderstanding. He knows that his love might not come across the way you expect it to, and that thought can be devastating. The pressure to be perfect, to be the strong one, to never show weakness can create a deep sense of inadequacy. And sometimes, he pulls away because he doesn't know how to be everything you want him to be while still holding on to his own sense of self. Men are not always distant because they don't care. Sometimes, they're distant because they feel like they're not enough. They want to love, they want to give, but the fear of not measuring up, of not being able to fulfill all the expectations placed upon them, can create an emotional wall. This wall, which often seems like a withdrawal, is actually the result of a deeper emotional struggle. Men, too, have feelings. They, too, crave connection, affection, and intimacy, but they are often not allowed the space to express these desires freely. The fear of judgment for not meeting the ideal of perfect masculinity can stifle their ability to communicate and express themselves in a way that resonates with their emotions. When a man seems distant, it's because he's struggling with the internal conflict of wanting to be everything to everyone while feeling like he's failing to meet the impossible standards set for him. What many don't see is that men, just like anyone else, need the freedom to be themselves, to love without fear of judgment, to be vulnerable without being seen as weak. Until society starts offering that permission to men, they will continue to carry this invisible burden, the weight of expectations that leaves them feeling alone in their struggles, even when they're surrounded by the people they love. So the next time a man pulls away, don't assume it's because he doesn't care. It might be because he's fighting an internal battle, one that involves both his love for you and the weight of a world that tells him he must always be strong. And finally, number 5. What men truly want. And here's the truth that's rarely spoken aloud, the truth that no one dares to say. Men want to be loved for who they are, not for what they provide. In a world that constantly pressures them to be the strong provider, the protector, the achiever, the expectations are clear. But underneath it all, what they really long for is to be seen, not for their actions, not for their accomplishments, but for the essence of who they are as a person. They want to be loved for the depth of their soul, for their vulnerabilities, for the parts of themselves they rarely show. At the core of it, a man's love is raw, deep, complex, and often misunderstood. The love he gives isn't the superficial, fleeting kind that can be measured by romantic gestures or grand declarations. His love runs deeper than any words can convey. It's the kind of love that is felt in the quiet moments, in the things left unsaid, in the willingness to stand by you without ever needing recognition. But it's also a love that is often overlooked. What men truly desire, at their core, is to be seen, truly seen. Not just in the role they play, but in the person they are. When a man shows love, it's not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's in the way he watches over you when you're unaware, the way he supports you without expecting anything in return, or the way he sacrifices parts of himself to make sure you feel cared for and safe. Ladies, if you really want to understand a man, you need to pay attention to more than just what he says. Watch his actions. Observe how he shows up in your life day after day. Look for the small, quiet signs that he's there for you, even when he's not speaking. Listen to his silences, because in those moments, you might hear more than you think. Sometimes, his silence is an expression of deep love, a moment when words are simply not enough to capture the depth of his feelings. And here's the most important part: give him the space to be himself. Men, like anyone else, need the freedom to exist without the constant pressure of living up to some unattainable standard. Let him show you his love on his terms, without forcing him into a mold that doesn't fit. Because when a man truly loves, it's not about flashy gestures or smooth words. It's about something far more powerful, a love that goes beyond the surface, something raw and pure, something that transcends what can be said or done in any given moment. The love a man has to offer is not measured in the things he can do for you, the money he can bring home, or the grand declarations of passion. It's measured in his depth, in his willingness to stand by you through thick and thin, in the moments he's silent and present when you need him most. That's the kind of love that is often misunderstood, but when recognized, it holds a beauty that no words can ever truly capture. So, ladies, next time you look at the man in your life, remember this: he loves you with a depth that goes beyond what you see on the surface. Appreciate him for who he is, and give him the space to express his love in the quiet, powerful ways that only a man can. So, now that you know the truth, ask yourself, are you ready to see and feel that love for what it really is? Because if you are, you'll unlock a deeper, more authentic connection than you ever thought possible. A love that isn't measured by grand gestures or flashy declarations, but by the quiet moments, the unspoken gestures, and the depth of vulnerability a man brings to the table. When you begin to understand and appreciate this, you'll see the raw beauty of a love that's not just about words, but about presence, commitment, and quiet devotion. The real connection, the one that transcends the surface, is waiting for you, but it requires a shift in perspective. It asks you to stop looking at love through the lens of what you think it should look like, and instead, see it for what it truly is in its purest form. As the music swells, you witness the power of this understanding in a final shot, a man and woman embracing, their arms wrapped around each other in a moment of mutual understanding, a connection that speaks volumes without saying a word. In this embrace, you can feel the depth of their bond, a love that doesn't need to be explained, because they've learned to listen to each other in ways that go beyond the spoken word. Don't judge a man by what he doesn't say. Pay attention to what he shows you. It's in his actions, in his silence, in his willingness to simply be there, in the moments when he stands beside you without needing recognition. That's where you'll find the most profound, real love, a love that doesn't need to shout to be heard.